Hello, everyone. This is
Oh,
Father Michael Tischel.
and this is Strati Papa Georgiou messing up.
Our imperfect. It's
I think
a
it's a podcast.
oh man, it's getting worse and worse every time.
It's been a minute since we've done one.
It has indeed an imperfect podcast.
Cue music.
So yeah, you're right. It has been a minute,
Yeah.
and we've been experiencing all sorts of fun things.
Oh yeah. It's been
Since then.
it's been a roller coaster. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah. Yep. Or
Yeah.
what? Or at what point in the roller coaster we're
Right.
experiencing?
Yeah.
Is this
Yeah.
like the beginning, the middle, or the end,
No, nobody knows.
or is it just like a circular roller coaster that just keeps going around and
Let's
around?
hope not.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't know how we got on if that were the case, but
Right.
yeah. So yeah, it's been a little while, and definitely excited to get back into things and
I
to
know.
continue the conversation
Let's do it.
and yeah. So we talked a little bit about exploring this interesting topic of an imperfect excellence.
Mm.
And before the podcast, we were just talking about how, we started this podcast sort of with this intuition or this sense that, we do ourselves a favor, especially in America, by acknowledging our inherent like imperfection as human beings, and like that that we have this tendency to sort of think that we should be perfect on a human level, and then we end up kind of like suppressing and almost denying our inherent fallibility and
Yeah,
imperfection.
the reality,
Yeah,
you
the
know.
reality, exactly. So like this is, the not even the water that we're swimming in, but the water that is within us, right? Because we're not even
Right.
swimming in it; it is within us, right? Um,
Right.
our identity as fallen human beings is going to be inherently broken and imperfect, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
um, I guess we qualify that by saying that at its core, it's not, right? We were created in God's image, which means that we have this spark of divine perfection, you could say, within us,
Mm-hmm.
this kind of
Yeah.
element of
Image and likeness of God, right?
right. So but then acknowledging the fall and the
Mm-hmm.
effects of the fall on us, that image has been tarnished, has been kind of beaten up, you could say,
Mm-hmm.
and so we're broken, we're imperfect, and we of our own accord, of our own will, of our own strength, of our own smarts, are not able to get ourselves back to that state of wholeness, of perfection that we were created in. And so in a certain sense, we have to come to this point of like giving up on our own ability to do that, right?
Yeah.
And saying like, look, as much as I would like to think that I should be perfect or whatever, ultimately on my own I am not, and I never will be. And it's at that point of sort of despair, you could say, on a human level, that paradoxically God can come in and actually do the work that we were trying
Yeah.
to do ourselves. And
Yeah.
I think that's been sort of the underlying message of our podcast up until this point. It's been right. I
Yeah.
mean, we've kind of approached all these different topics:
Right.
desire, control,
Mm-hmm.
all these kind of interesting topics,
Yeah.
from this kind of like, I don't know, just like realistic, kind of somewhat laid back, perhaps, but in a good way,
Yeah.
perspective. Would you agree?
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, it's been really good. I mean, people started to reach out and show their love, and they really enjoy the podcast, and so that in and of itself is proof that we're doing a good job here.
And people are
Um,
spying on our conversation.
people are. So yeah, I don't know why they keep doing that. It's really weird.
It's kind of, I don't know.
It's a
It's a
little
little
messed
weird.
up, you
Yeah.
know. It's a little
But whatever floats your boat.
yeah, I feel like stalking two guys talking about stuff. That's fine.
Yeah.
It's not like anybody puts it on the internet.
No,
Right,
we keep it very
publicly,
private.
publicly or anything. Yeah.
That's right. We're very
No,
private about our conversations.
right, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, the beginning, like the first, I don't know how many episodes. It was very like it was about fundamental things like pride.
Yes,
I don't know
that's
if we
right.
covered anger ever. Did we do
I
anger?
think we did do anger. Yeah, I'm kind of looking that up right now, but I'm pretty sure we covered anger at one point. If I, but maybe not. Maybe we didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of upset about that actually. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, it's so bad, so bad, so bad. Oh man. Responsibility, Thanksgiving, surprise, aging,
Yeah.
anxiety, freedom.
I don't think we did anger.
Yeah, maybe we didn't do anger.
Well, regardless, it was a lot of like very
Yeah,
you might call basic or maybe like
fundamental.
fundamental, yeah,
Yeah.
fundamental stuff.
Hmm.
And yeah. And so now where do we go from there?
Right. And I think, we've mentioned this on one level or another at different points in the podcast, but, I think we could sort of go to two extremes in this conversation. We could sort of say on the one hand that, as humans, we should be perfect and we should strive for perfection and kind of give in to this sort of relentless agony of perfectionism. Strati's just taking a picture of me as I'm soapboxing. This kind of, this agonizing kind of rat race of perfectionism. So we just give into that on the one extreme. On the other extreme is sort of the sense of like, oh, we're just imperfect, we're fallible, let's just sit on our couch and
Right.
not do anything
Yeah.
about it. And it's sort of like, it's almost like an excuse for apathy and kind of like sloppiness, right?
Right.
And so I guess what I'm sort of coming to is that perhaps there's I don't know, sort of like a process in this sort of sense of becoming as human beings where, especially when we're at first sort of acutely traumatized by that tyranny of perfectionism, right? I
Right.
think we have to take some time to sort of detox from it
Mhm.
and to say like, look, we're not perfect. We're never going to be perfect. Let's just take a deep breath and relax a little bit, like not kind of worry about things so much, not sort of succumb to this kind of tyrannical voice of like, you need to be better, you must be doing this, you should be doing that,
Yeah.
and this kind of this kind of narrative, this inner monologue that we kind of are beaten up by oftentimes
Yeah.
as humans, right? So there's I think there's a process of sort of like releasing our, like, just kind of letting go of that and ceasing to identify with that
Mhm.
with that voice, I guess you could say, realizing that that voice is not who we are deep down inside. And I think
Mhm.
once we sort of let go of that and we sort of allow that voice to kind of, it could still be there in the background, but we're not giving it too much credence, that we're not
Yeah.
letting it sort
It's
of.
a it's kind of about a balance, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I it's maybe, yeah, once we kind of step back from that a little bit,
Mhm.
then I think other voices can emerge in our consciousness, to
Yeah.
put it very, esoterically, right? Like, and we've talked about this actually in our conversation at Marlowe's. We talked
Mhm.
a little bit about this idea of like the top down sort of like when we're
Yeah.
talking about things related to faith, where it's just like, you know this is true, right?
Right.
And kind of like having this very kind of authoritarian sense of truth, where it's like, if you don't believe this, you know
You're
you're going to
condemned.
hell, you're
Right.
condemned.
Yeah.
And if you do believe it, great, but it's true,
You're going to heaven.
right, you're going to heaven. And then what happens is that, like, the rest of who you are sort of shrivels,
Right.
right? And you're just sort of this like slavish sort of, you know kind of half creature that's kind of just doing the will of this inner tyrant, right? And or that's could be an outer tyrant that's kind of an inner tyrant
Yeah.
too. But again, like, is that God? And we even talked about how Saint Paisios, when he Elder Paisios from Mount Athos, when he was a novice, he had that experience of like wanting to go to sleep, and like he finished his prayers for the evening, and then he's like about to hit the pillow, his head's about to hit the pillow, and then he hears this voice saying like, no, like there are more people suffering in this world, you have to get up and do more. And so then he gets up and he does more prayers, and then like he's like exhausted, but he's like about to go to sleep, and the same voice comes and like, no, there are even more people. And it just gets to the point where he even says like his head's about to explode, right? And it's like he feels like he's going to go crazy, and then he realizes like, this can't be from God, right? This is not from God, this is from the evil one. And it's not a God is oxygen, right? He's
and it's interesting because that kind of thing, like tempting you to pray, even while
right.
I'm not sure how and to what extent we experience that,
Right.
like this next level of like spiritual warfare, I guess.
Sure.
But it's even mentioned in the life of Saint Anthony, which is a very ancient. I mean, he was
fourth century,
so 300s,
third, fourth.
Yeah. And I remember reading that in there, and I was like, oh my goodness, I don't even know. Like, I can't. This is too much for me. It was like, and it discouraged me a little bit.
Sure.
Because, well, it discouraged me in that context, but it definitely fits within our narrative. But it discouraged me in that context when it came to that specific book. I was almost like, well, all right, I'm clearly not a monk.
Right.
Like, it kind of hit me. I'm like, I am not a monastic. Maybe this isn't for me. This is text right here.
Right.
But I mean, like, yeah, I mean, it's definitely like an example of how even on that level, that sort of like, I can do more, I can be better, and whatever, is definitely even present in that. So I mean, sometimes we wonder like, what oh, what's the same what's the similarity between us and monastics and ascetics? Well, it's actually pretty much the same human experience, isn't it?
Sure.
Just slightly different
context.
I don't know, context, and yeah.
Yep. No, absolutely. Yeah. So so there's that sense of kind of the realization, you could say, that we are not, that tyrannical voice is not God, and it's not our true selves. Right. Which, we could kind of connect God with our true selves in the sense that we're created in God's image, right? And so our true self is going to have that same peace and that same joy and that same sense of life and oxygen, right, about whatever it is that we're doing. And so anything that is not that, right, even if it purports to be that, like pray more, is suspect, because it's, instead of giving us life and giving us joy and giving us oxygen, it's stealing it.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, anything that comes to us that gives us that disturbs us, if you may,
right,
that's not from God,
right,
so
right. So that's where I think, again, like discerning between this kind of human perfectionism that can even take on a religious or kind of like pseudo spiritual sort of form,
right,
and actually, and then like what it means to actually commune with God, who's perfect.
It's a good question, because I mean, like, I have those thoughts often. I should be doing more,
Right.
And I'm thinking now, okay, there's obviously like a balance with that, right? Like, sure, I could be doing more, but I guess it's more about like, how will I go about doing more and doing it better, or not doing better, but doing it right, doing more right, the right way, rather than the taking it and shoving it,
right,
rather than forcing it, rather than, because if you force it, you're gonna burn out. You're not gonna definitely not gonna enjoy it.
Sure.
And I think that happens a lot, and also it happens a lot with, like, not mean to pick on them, but like with converts, especially brand new converts, when it comes to like fasting, and they're like, I'm going to fast the full capacity of Lent. Not
Right.
maybe not the full, because like then you're like eating bread and water, but like
Right.
the basic guidelines, like on this day know this, on this day know that, and there's
Right.
nothing wrong with that, but work your way up to it, and one day do it. Don't. But yeah, and you hear them that they do that, and it becomes less about like the spiritual struggle at some point, and it becomes more about like achieving some sort of abstract goal. Like I did it, I finished the race, but not spiritually. I just sort of finished it.
Right.
I did it. It's
Right.
like, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
like doing your chores, and you finish doing them. Hey, I did them. And the place is spotless. But
Right.
that's not.
Well, I think it has to. Don't you think it has something to do with sort of feeling our sense of worth as humans, like our value, and that these kinds of actions can give us at least a temporary sense that I'm valuable
Right.
because I've accomplished this action and this sort of act.
Yeah, it's definitely, yeah, but then that doesn't that. I mean, correct me, but like, doesn't that then fall into like not ego, like the ego, like it's about me,
Right.
like
Sure.
beyond, obviously there's a level of it being about you, right? Salvation is about us, but then it's like an extreme, a distorted version of about you. It's no
Yeah.
longer done with love, perhaps you could say, or I don't know, the right lenses, maybe. I don't know how to.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah, the ego kind of looking at it from the perspective of,
Yeah,
yeah,
you're
it's
trying to.
very kind of
Yeah,
maybe self-preservation, or kind of like,
yeah, like a
yeah.
boxer, right? You're basically just like trying to, like, like I said before, win the race for the sake of winning the race, rather than go sort of a wider, more a deeper sort of understanding of things. Like, I was on Discord today, and this guy was asking about hesychasm,
Yeah.
and and I responded, being very new there, but I still responded,
Yep.
saying that, well, hesychasm is generally for monastics, and he didn't quite like that, and I don't even know if this person was Orthodox yet. There's a lot of like inquirers that sort of, no offense to them, but sometimes you get the feeling like, oh, so you're Orthodox. Like, no, not yet. It's like, well, then why don't we just take a seat?
Right.
But that's fine then. Like, I'm always happy to hear people who
Sure.
are interested. Obviously, it's not like,
Right.
but yeah. So this person, yeah, he was sort of struggling with the notion that, so taking kind of to extremes again. Oh, so just because I'm a non-monastic, I can't, even do any of it. It's like, no, that's not what we're saying. We're saying that hesychasm means leaving the whole world, leaving your
Mm-hmm.
family, leaving your everybody and everything you love, and sleeping on the ground, and maybe wandering around and going to caves.
Right.
It's even beyond like a monastery to some extent. I mean,
Sure.
there are some, who achieved it within, obviously, but it's an extreme sort of thing, but an extreme thing done right,
Right.
done
Right.
in the measures of divine love,
Yeah.
and not in the human confines, confinement,
Right.
human confinement, and I think that's really an interesting sort of, yeah, it's an
Well, I
interesting.
think that's exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head with this whole topic of an
Right,
imperfect excellence, right?
right,
Because you were talking about a sense of balance, right?
right,
Which another way of putting that is, we don't want to go to extremes, right?
right.
And so we're talking about not going to extremes on this kind of level of human extremes, right? Either
Mm-hmm.
complete human apathy or complete human perfectionism,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when you have sort of achieved this sense of the middle path on that human level, it's then that you can discover the right kind of
Right,
extreme, right?
right,
The right kind of extremism, which is kind
right,
of what you're talking
right.
about as far as like that extreme eros, that extreme love for God. And that's kind of, I think, where we've come to perhaps in our podcast, is this kind of, you know, from a societal and even individual perspective, there's a sense in which we've gone to this extreme as far as like this inner pressure, either self-imposed or imposed from the outside,
Right.
to be perfect, like as far as like kind of like having all of your I's dotted and all your T's crossed.
And it's not, I don't think it's brand new either. Like,
No.
I remember when I was in high school, we talked about in English class, we talked about Benjamin Franklin and how he had this, like, I don't know, was it like a book or a journal where he was literally trying to be perfect?
Uh-huh.
He's literally trying to do everything perfectly.
Okay.
Exactly kind of what we're talking about, this obsession with doing everything on time and doing it just the right amount. And I just remember thinking, this does not sound right. Like,
Right.
This does not sound
almost like a OCD kind of like.
Yeah, OCD. Well, I don't know if he was actually OCD. He might have been, but like maybe not like, to the point where he couldn't function, I'm sure.
Sure.
But yeah, so that's it's an interesting little throwback to high school right there.
Yeah, that is.
And the 1700s.
Throw way back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, and then, and people idolize, to some extent, the men like Franklin and all those guys. So it's like, so obviously it's in the consciousness of the nation, right? Like to take them as examples.
Sure.
So it's definitely even an American it's definitely American in its I mean, I'm sure other cultures, but like within this context,
to an extent, you can look all the way back to scripture as far as like scribes and the Pharisees, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, right.
Seems like that was their.
Oh yeah, they were the worst, apparently. as called out by the Son of Man,
right? Allegedly, allegedly, as attested to by Jesus Christ himself,
right?
Right. Yeah. No, it's it's certainly perennial. I mean, sometimes I sort of wonder if it isn't especially exacerbated given sort of the industrialized environment where we're sort of like always comparing ourselves to machines and things like that.
Yeah, well, I think there it's well, now with the precision of things,
right?
You're right, machines and such, like things are more precise. Like time is more precise, quote unquote precise. Like
right.
From like we know exactly it's 3:32, right? In the time of Christ, as as terrible as the Pharisees were, I'm sure they had no idea, like exactly what time it was compared to what we know now.
Sure.
Or at least the way we count it.
Yeah.
Right. It's midday. Excellent.
Right.
Great. It's sunset. Got it. Thank you.
What time is it, Pharisee? It's sunset. Okay, thanks. How far past sunset?
Or it's like it's a very hot hour. Time when it is most hot outside.
What time is it? It's really hot.
Exactly.
Yep. So I'm sure that's how they told time back then.
Well,
who knows? They had sundials.
They had sundials, and they said it's the 9th hour.
There we go.
They had decent. They had good. They had time, but like now we know down to the millisecond. We know down to the, and so like, and due to that, and due to the precision of things, and it's cultural too.
Yep.
Western European. I mean, if you go to Eastern Europe, if you go to Greece, if then you go to the Middle East, I mean, obviously they're a lot more relaxed. They're a lot
Forget
more. Forget about it. They're very, they say, well, I'll be there at 4, and they're there at 5. I mean, what was it? Back when we went to Crete one time, and there was a panigiri, or a celebration for a feast day of a village, and the musician, like the thing started at, what was it? 10:09. He got there at 12.
Nice.
It didn't play until like 12:30.
Nice.
Or 11. I don't remember. Yeah. He was like an hour or two not on time, and we even asked the waiter, and the waiter was like, he's so and so, like he can do what he can go, because he was kind of famous. Sure. He can go whenever he wants, right? Like
and that's part of the sort of I don't know, the attract. I mean, that's part of the attraction in a certain sense. It's like,
right, yeah.
Because it is cultural, and we certainly can't sort of expect one culture's rhythm to happen in another culture. But that said, and I am a little biased given, having spent some time in Greece myself, I think there is something very humane,
Yeah.
in this kind of, and actually not only humane but almost divine
Mm-hmm.
in this sense of kind of timelessness, right? It's like
Yeah.
time doesn't have that
Yeah.
kind of ultra sort of measured
Like
quality.
yeah, like in Cyprus when it's like, let's say somebody said they'll be there at 2,
Right.
and it's 2, 2:05, 2:06, 2:10. You ask somebody, where are they? They go, it's their time.
It's their
Enoratus.
time.
Enoratus.
Right.
It's their time. They'll be here soon,
Yep,
right? Like,
yep, yep, yep.
doesn't matter. This is the time they're gonna be here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like a very relative sort of way of
Yeah,
thinking.
which is very scientific, right? I mean, the theory of relativity and everything. I
Right.
mean, it's like
Right.
time isn't really even isn't
Here
a
we're really tempted to say, where is he? He's late.
right.
5 minutes late. It's 1
Right.
minute late.
By our agreed upon
Right.
expectation and
Our verbal like
contract.
contract.
Yes. Yeah, well, and it's a value statement. I mean, if you're late,
Oh yeah.
it basically means that you don't care about the other person. You care more about yourself.
Right.
So there are these kind of inherent assumptions that, again, you have to be
Oh, yeah.
sensitive to, and
There's some virtue in being on time. It's not
right,
like,
right,
especially if
right,
it's a serious, like you need to be somewhere, obviously.
right. Yeah, and I guess that's sort of getting at our topic. Like, even in these laid back societies, you still see these examples of people who are not, like, you sort of have this caricature image of, like, in a Mediterranean society, everyone's just kind of slouching on these like lawn chairs, like right by the beach front, and just sipping on margaritas and just having a
Right.
great time, right? And that's,
Definitely
I mean, there's no question, there's no doubt that they know how to have a good time.
Sure.
But there's also no question, no doubt that they've gone through very intense, periods of struggle and suffering, and that, there are people in these cultures that have that sense of what the Greeks call philotimo, right? That sense of kind of being an upstanding, honorable,
honoring friendship, or
yeah,
or
and
a friend of
friend of honor, right? Lover
Right.
of honor. So it's it's a nuanced point that there can be a sense of sort of calmness and, laid backness, and simultaneously an uprightness and kind of honor and dignity and work, diligence and kind of, and almost, and a sense of excellence, right? Excellence in, and loving excellence, like to be a lover of excellence, to be a lover of doing the best at what you're doing, at your job that you can possibly do, craftsmanship and artistry and, all these things, like they're not opposed, right? The humaneness and the precision in a human sense actually are not opposed. It's the precision in a mechanical or mechanistic sense, where we turn ourselves more into kind of robots, than humans. That's problematic. And
I feel like it's almost like a cliche now, to some extent. Like, like it's even like the moral of a movie. I feel like, like calm down, chill out.
right.
I feel like there's probably been several comedies that have had that as their like punchline moral at the end of the movie, right? Like, teach the uptight businessman how to relax. Like, it's so ingrained in the culture.
Oh yeah, I'd actually
where
an Andy Griffith.
there you go.
There's a great Andy Griffith episode about how this like really highfalutin, I don't know if he was a lawyer or just a businessman, salesman or whatever, is kind of like, speeding through Mayberry, and it's a Sunday and his car breaks down, and Andy is, I think Andy is helping him out, and he takes him, he says, I need a mechanic, and they go to the mechanic's house. Of course, the mechanic's off because it's Sunday and everybody's relaxing. And he goes through this whole process of, trying to get help, and nobody is available because everybody is taking the day off on a Sunday, because that's in Mayberry. That's what they do. It's their kind of, it's a southern, kind of.
Yeah, it's also like what, 60s in the
50s, 60s, small town, southern kind of thing. And so, but it ends, spoiler alert, it ends with the guy kind of becoming he's kind of a convert now to this way of life, and he doesn't want to leave. And
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, there you go. And that was probably at a time when the world was getting a little more and more intense,
sure.
and that show was trying to take people back, maybe.
But
To
frankly, I mean, as an American, as someone who grew up in America and then spent time in Greece, like, and then going back to Greece on a continual basis, it's very therapeutic.
Hmm.
You know, there's something I would consider to be healthy and therapeutic in that kind of an environment, because, you know, I don't know what it is. I mean, it's like something internally sort of um you know, it's like this internal
Yeah.
fist that's clenched.
No, I know what
And
you mean.
then you know, you sort of spend enough time there, and it's like the waves of that kind of rhythm just kind of loosen
Yeah.
the you know, the grasp that we hold on life, and then we're able to. And what happens when that happens is that not only do you relax, but you actually, your whole self sort of just emerges in a much
Mhm.
more normal and beautiful way, and your creativity blossoms,
I
and
agree.
you're able to think more clearly and more creatively and more out of the boxly. And, you know,
Yeah.
it's you know, and I think, you know, I liken it, you know, there's this whole kind of notion that I think plays out in a lot of different facets of our life, whether it's in, like, on a psychological level or a spiritual level or a communal level, societal level, whatever, which is to say that, um, you know, we exist on every facet of our being, both individually and communally, as sort of polyphonic
Hmm.
beings,
Sure.
right? In the sense that we, even internally, we're sort of this symphony, right? We've got so many different aspects to who we are: body, soul,
Hmm.
mind, spirit, right? And then even within our soul on a spiritual level, we've got you know, the different kind of powers of the soul, as far as, you know, our appetitive power, desiring power, our irascible power, our, you know, this kind of this sense of good, anger, and then our intellect, and how they all kind of,
Oh yeah,
you know,
it's
play together.
polyphony.
And yeah, polyphony, right? And the problem is that when we have sort of one voice that tries to drown out all the
Mm.
other voices, and the moment you get that one kind of monological, like monologue, right, or like kind of like tyrannical
Yeah,
voice,
I was just thinking totalitarian, right? Like,
totalitarian, right, you know, that one voice, and then everybody sort of like shrinks, all the other voices sort of shrink back and go on the defensive, and sort of, you know, are no longer, they're kind of like they're like little turtles going back into their, you
yeah,
know,
I
to
think
their
I was just
shells.
imagining little turtles just sinking into their shell.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's great. Although for some reason the first thing that popped into my mind was that the ancient Greeks, like I forgot who it was. What was the ancient Greek musician Pythagoras, I think,
Oh,
who
uh-huh.
one of a few of them, like
Yeah.
they believed in the sort of like monophonic
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
music opposed to polyphonic music. This
Mm-hmm.
is totally out of
Yeah, that's funny.
nothing to really do with it other than,
Right.
but yeah, so because it broke up the harmony of the universe.
Yeah.
That's just how they
Yep.
thought of it, like the
That is
harmony of
interesting.
the universe or of creation, and how polyphony is sort of chaotic, but at the same time, like the analogy we're using right here for this specific is perfect.
Right.
Like we need all these different things to work in harmony. In fact, actually, there you go. The flow of who we are, and when there's only one thing, like the aspect of the part of us that is trying to strive to be, to do better at stuff, when that side is the only part that's heard, well then
Right.
you become stressed, etc.
Yeah. Yeah.
I totally, that's a great analogy. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it works on any other level, like on a
Yeah.
family system or a societal system. When you have that, when you have one voice that strives to sort of be the only voice that's heard,
Yeah.
then all the other voices, in order to preserve themselves, they sort of shrink back in a certain
Right.
sense. And
Yeah.
versus, you know, the recognition of this kind of need for polyphony, or not need for, but the beauty of polyphony.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
polyphony when it's in harmony
yeah.
with all the other voices, not when the choir is just everybody just screaming cacophonously.
Well, that, I mean, that in and of itself is an interesting point, because I've thought about that. You know, is polyphony, is polyphony necessary or beautiful when it's harmonious, when it's harmonious? And I think the one case to be made for the beauty of polyphony, even as cacophony, is that on a human level, let's say like a societal level, right, where you have all these different sort of voices, is that basically the philosophy behind like polyphony is that you're acknowledging the inherent sort of reality and depth of each
Oh, yeah.
voice, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I mean that can be taken to an extreme though, which I think we kind of I mean there's always going to be a cacophony.
Right.
There's no way you can't have that. I think that where it becomes extreme, and this isn't necessarily what we're necessarily geared to talk about right now, but like where it becomes is when the society when people in it have nothing in common anymore, and then
Right.
there's no sort of harmonious sort of understanding each
Sure.
other. You
Sure.
know, that's
Yeah.
the only way it could become. But yeah, no, I people are people. They're not automatons.
Well, that's, yeah, and I mean, it's, you know, there's a fascinating aspect of this with like novels,
Sure.
you know, and there's a this literary critic, Russian literary critic named Mikhail Bakhtin. I don't remember how to pronounce his name, but he talked a lot about Dostoevsky, and and there's this really interesting notion about the novel that, like, you know, we think about a novel, it's like a fictional
Right.
story, right?
Yeah.
And it was either in this book that Bakhtin wrote, or it was like the preface to the book, but basically the idea was that that, you know, most novels are actually not novels, they're monologues.
Yeah.
And the way that this was described is that most authors don't know how to write a true novel, because what they usually do is they have an agenda, in a certain sense. They have their sort of voice, their
Yeah.
authorial voice, and all of the characters sort of submit to that
Right.
dominant voice,
I mean it. Yeah.
right? But he said, like, people like Dostoevsky and some of these great like novelists are exceptions, are kind of exceptional in that regards, because they actually know how to sort of how to generate this whole world without imposing their authorial voice
Right.
and making the other characters sort of like,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Them.
Right.
It's like if I wrote
Or
a
yeah.
novel and I'm playing every character.
Yeah. And
Something.
the I think where the true litmus test comes out is when it's a character that's like the opposite of what the author
Right.
believes, and somebody who is not a true novelist will make that character into kind of like a caricature.
Right. Sure. Sure.
You
Because he
know.
doesn't know how to put the subtleties of human beings and stuff like that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So like like respecting the subjectivity of everybody, even if they're radically different than you.
Right.
Right. That's where I think polyphony
Sure.
is beautiful, even if it's seemingly cacophonous. That
Right.
said, somehow when I read Dostoevsky,
Sure.
and maybe this is me projecting my own bias or whatever, I don't know,
I've
but
never read it, so I need
yeah.
to.
But well, anyway, I mean, it's worth reading. But when I read him, you do get this sense that there's a polyphony, but sort of infused in that somehow
Mm-hmm.
is this sort of beautiful vision for I mean, there's a harmony that's sort of like in that, without it being like a forced harmony, I guess. I don't know how to
Mm-hmm.
explain it, but yeah.
No, I get it. I get what you're saying. Yeah. No, I mean, some people just have it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Interesting. Yeah. So I mean, going back to like, so this is a great way it's a great way of talking about basically what the forced perfection, um, away from without God's help to become perfect in Him, because He's the only perfect thing.
right.
Um, I mean, I, this comes to mind, but it's only mainly because I'm just reading the life of Saint Silouan by Saint Sophrony,
Oh, nice.
and I mean, it's some of it's just mind blowing. I recommend it to anybody, but he really tries to, and this is a little, I guess it's a little off topic, but it's sort of, it's all related. Sort of the discussion on how the 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 person only sort of discovers how did he put it? Well, basically, bringing it back to what we were saying, the whole like, you can't become perfect without God,
Mm-hmm.
and any attempt to become perfect without God is a vain attempt. And yeah, sorry.
Is it that sense of what he calls blessed despair, where you like
Right,
you sort of like give up on yourself
right.
and your own ability to? Is that
Yeah,
kind of along the lines of what he was
I
talking
think
about?
I think so. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big. I know that's a big theme in Saint Sophrony, and I'm sure he kind of like got it from Saint Silouan, but just like, yeah, just kind of like, and I think that's kind of what Saint Silouan's the revelation given to Saint Silouan about like keep your mind in hell and despair not is sort of all about, because it's if you place yourself in hell while you're on earth,
right.
right? You're sort of, I mean, by definition, you're condemning yourself. You're
Was
condemning yourself.
wasn't that the whole thing with like keep your mind in hell? Wasn't that because he sort of experienced hell?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Didn't he experience the
well,
absence of grace?
he he
Correct me, I don't
he
remember.
did. No, he did. But part of it too was experiencing this incredible grace and then losing it
Right,
based on his kind of ego, I guess
right, yeah,
based on kind of like not knowing how to hold on to it. And so
right,
this was in response to his desire to experience that initial gift of grace that he had and that he lost, right? And then God finally responded and say, okay, essentially, Silouan, if you want to hold on to the presence of me,
yeah,
you need to keep your mind in hell.
right. What
And
was it?
there's
Yeah,
yeah,
essentially remembering what that was like, sort of.
yeah. Remembering what the feeling of abandonment was like.
Right. Yeah, wasn't
I
that kind of what it
I think
was?
that's, yeah, I think that's part of it. But I mean, I think
Yeah,
really it is ultimately it's, what is hell in the Christian life? I mean,
sure.
hell in the Christian life is the consequence, the ultimate consequence of our sinful lives, right?
Right.
And so for I think for us as Christians, I think the articulation of that, keep your mind in hell, is to say that to basically, put yourself in the worst possible place, like put yourself in the most hopeless
Mm.
place, right? But don't despair,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of a
Mhm.
a it's
Intense.
a it's intense, and it's very kind of paradoxical, because it's like, if anything, I'd want to run away from that hopeless
Right.
place.
Right.
And what this is saying is actually, don't run away from it. Like,
Embrace
keep
it.
yourself, yeah, embrace it, keep yourself in it, like stay in the fire, right?
Is it
Stay
like
in the hellfire, but don't despair. Which is, how do you do that? Like, how?
is it like an endurance test almost?
It's
I know that's a bit
no, it's a good,
simplistic.
yeah, it's a good
Bit
question. How
simplistically
do you
put.
and it's not, to quote kind of or to paraphrase one of Saint Sophrony's disciples, who's a Romanian monk, Father Raphael Noica. He said it's not a commandment. It's not like thou shalt not despair, right?
Right.
Like, so it's not something that we, again, like we kind of turn into this kind of like authoritarian, like I have to force myself to not despair, right? It has nothing to do with that. It's this kind of, it's yeah, I mean, it's sort of something that we experience, and it's like, we the way he put it is it's not a commandment, thou shalt not despair. It's more of a it's actually more of a consolation. It's like, you don't have to despair.
Right.
You don't have to despair, because no matter how bad you've messed it up, right?
Yeah.
no matter how broken you are, no matter how hopeless the situation may seem based on your sinfulness, right?
Yeah.
There's always hope, right? That God is the God of hope against all human hope, right? Like,
And he's the only one who can do that. You can't
exactly.
truly do it on your own. I mean, no matter how much you would try, you're gonna end up. I mean, and the book talks about all these concepts. It's just kind of hard. It's not very. I don't know if the translation's not great.
Sure.
The version I read, maybe, but like it's very like just kind of mind blowing.
Yeah.
Like, sort of. It's incredible. It's beautiful. It's like it opens up a whole reality to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is I think we could probably do another episode just on the perfect the concept.
Yeah, I agree. And just to kind of qualify Saint Silouan thing, because I think it's important to mention that that word that was given to Saint Silouan of keep your mind in hell and despair not, like, is a very intense word, and we have to keep in mind that A, he was living a very extreme ascetic life. B, this was he was experiencing like the First World War and the craziness, and Saint Sophrony too was experiencing both world wars, and the craziness that came with the world wars and the feeling of like being in hell, like cosmically speaking. And so when Father Zachariah of Essex, Saint Sophrony's spiritual son, who's still alive to this day, when he was a younger confessor and priest monk and was hearing people's confessions, at one point he gave the advice of the word of Saint Silouan, like keep your mind in hell and despair not, to a young, I think it was a nun or just some person coming to him for confession. And Saint Sophrony found out about it, and he actually scolded him. He said she couldn't handle that, like that. You shouldn't have given her that advice. You should have rather encouraged her to say, I thank you, O Lord, for all things.
Right.
It's
not for everybody, and I think a lot of people get into like you put like stuff on Instagram or whatever, like you put all these like saints quotes and stuff, and it's like they'll put that one, and it's like everything applies where it applies.
Yeah.
Not everybody gets the same advice, the same sort of method.
And not at the same time. Like maybe it doesn't
later.
apply now. Maybe it'll apply later, right?
Exactly. Maybe later, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
it's interesting.
But unfortunately, I see that a lot, and I feel like what I'm about to say, like this kind of thing I'm about to say, is going to come up often nowadays. But what I see is a lot of extremes happening. I'm sure it's always been kind of out there, but I'm seeing this sort of an internet culture that, while very good, also is, to phrase before, cacophony. Of people, the blind leading the blind.
Sure.
Anyway, that's on my mind. We might do a whole episode discussing sort of internet. I don't know what to call it. The craziness.
It's the Wild West. It's the Wild West. That's what I always.
It's the new Wild West.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it's interesting how that all plays out.
Yeah, and sort of like people, like they'll hear this and then they'll take that and they'll run with it. Well, I read this. Well, I read that. Well, this saint said it, therefore that's the dogma now. It's like, no. No, it's not. Like anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, ultimately, in the midst of those extremes, kind of being able to give up on our own attempt to save ourselves.
Right.
Like whether you're trying to save yourself this way, right, or whether you're trying to save yourself that way. Right. Like that, no way is going to.
Right.
Right. I mean, because that's, I mean, it's that's where that blessed despair comes into play. And it's like, again, it's like very paradoxical and counterintuitive, because like, why would I want to give up on myself? And I mean, to be frank, like, you know, yeah, I mean, it's a scary place to be in, because, um, giving up on yourself sounds like the first step towards suicide in a certain sense,
Right.
right? If
Yeah.
we're just going to be completely honest,
Well,
and
yeah.
you know, and and so, I think for many of us, we would want to run as far as we can from that inclination.
Sure.
Um, but when it comes down to it, I mean, if we don't give up on ourselves, spiritually speaking,
Right. Right.
not physically, as far as like actually like killing ourselves,
Right.
our physical selves, but if we can't give up on ourselves, spiritually speaking, then we're actually not going to be able to progress
Mm-hmm.
in the
Yeah.
Christian life. like
Sure.
like you literally cannot be a Christian if you have not given up on yourself
Yeah.
spiritually.
Yeah. Because you sort of you keep hanging on to what we're talking about, this image of yourself, and essentially idol worshiping yourself, or this thing that you think you should be.
Right.
Yeah, you're never going to progress. You're just going to sort of continue the same cycle of just whatever, whether it's destruction or internal destruction, or you know.
Or the illusion that you've made progress, or the
Oh yeah,
illusion that you've
sure.
achieved some sort of, and then kind of becoming very quickly disillusioned by some
Yeah,
event happening in your
yeah.
life, where all of a sudden now you're back to square one, and then
Right,
you're just like, well, man, I've made no progress, and it's like a
right,
broken record. And
right.
it's like, well, yep.
Yeah.
That place of despair is a healthier place. As painful as it is, it's a healthier place to be in than some sort of pseudo elation because I'm somehow, making spiritual progress.
Yeah, sort of realizing knowing yourself. I think we've talked about that before. I think in an earlier one we talked about, and this sort of I think it was an Abba, a desert father, and somebody sort of, he started explaining to somebody what it's like to be near God, and he sort of used it in human terms.
Hmm.
And it's like was speaking to this like local, leader, community leader, and he was like, well, what would it be like if you what is happening?
I'm lowering my standing desk so I can sit now.
It is
That's what the
okay.
noise is. I'm sorry.
So, okay, so
I'm
yeah,
back.
well, it's community leader. I don't know if he was like, I don't know, prefect or governor, or I don't remember, maybe not a governor, but like somebody kind of important. And he said, I'm kind of paraphrasing and trying to remember exactly how it, I'm not going to get exact, but he said, what would you, the monk said to him, what would it be like if you went to the next city? And he goes, oh, I'd be open, welcomed with open arms. I would be, treated like a king. Okay, what would it be like if you went a little further down the road, or like, not down the road, but like further, a different part of the empire? He's like, well, I know the guy there, so it'll be less, but it'll still be there. But he's
Yeah.
like, what would it be like if you went to Constantinople? It's like, I'd be a peasant, a pauper, a nobody. And
Mm-hmm.
the Abba said, well, that's pretty much what it's like when you're facing God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're pretty much, you realize how little you are, how nobody you are.
That's good. Yeah.
That always stuck with me, that sort of analogy.
Yeah. That is very good.
Yeah.
That sense of exile and kind of like being
How,
unknown and kind of,
and how sort of realizing how small you are in the
yeah.
face of such a largeness. Of course, if you think about how huge the universe is, the way we keep discovering how big. I mean, we're literally like an ant,
Nothing.
not even
Nothing.
an ant. We're like I don't even know, an atom.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's all about, you know, the only kind of progress we can make is in our own sort of self-realization that we are, like in decreasing our, kind of like this decreasing sense of who we are, and
Yeah.
and actually not in some sort of like
Right.
twisted self-esteem, weird, kind of like,
Yeah.
like, which is actually the opposite, because
Right.
it's what we've
Right.
talked about in the past, where it's like, actually, I my low self-esteem comes from this
Right.
idea that I should be someone
Right.
big, but I'm not, and so
Yeah. So you're really, it's the same. It's just
it's the other side of the coin.
wearing different pants.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, it's impossible, man. It's the, it's it's the spiritual life is impossible.
Well, it's not. It's not.
Well, no, it
Impossible.
is. It is.
Well,
It is impossible. It is impossible by
on
our
your own.
standards of
Oh, sure.
possibility.
There you go. There it is.
Yeah, it's
There it is.
impossible.
It's impossible. Yeah.
It's impossible.
Everybody just give up.
So give up on yourself.
Give up on yourself.
Give up on yourself, and put yourself into God's hands.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect way to end.
Yeah. Yep.
This was a good one.
I was. Yeah. I'm excited to keep going.
On the next episode, we're gonna talk with
Yes. Justin.
Yeah, from Japan.
From Japan. A very interesting person, a very interesting story. And it's going to be a very interesting time, because he will be talking to us at 5 a.m. his time, and we'll see how coherent he'll be at that time.
I saw the email, so yeah. I got the memo that
it's going to be interesting.
Poor Justin is going to be waking up at an ungodly hour.
Yep. But he's American, and he lives in Japan, and I guess we'll hear a little bit about what brought him there and how he became Orthodox, and some interesting things about that. All right, sir.
Well, we'll see you all next week.
Indeed.
And,
until then, yes. And give up.
Bye.